So I'm Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and I'm also the co-host of Astronomy Cast.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you with us today. Basically, my first question is, how did you first become interested in science as a child, or if it was that early? Was there a specific event or person who kind of influenced you in that direction?
Yeah, I was really lucky because I grew up in a very scientific household. Both my parents were huge sci-fi fans. We watched Star Trek, we went and saw Star Wars. I had a little toy phaser that I shot around the house too much. And so I was really lucky that both of my parents were very supportive. When I was just a little kid, my dad woke me up to see the first space shuttle launch. And so it was great to just kind of have access to these ideas. I had lots of books to go through. So, I definitely have to put the fault squarely on my parents for getting me into science in the first place.
Well, that's fantastic. It's always good to grow up in an environment like that where it's very supportive of your interest, and to be immersed in science that early is excellent. How did you pursue that as you got older?
Well, I was always like an organizer. I was always a person who wanted to kind of make things happen. And so when I was like 14 years old, I bought my first telescope, and I organized star parties on the small island where I grew up. I joined the journalism program for my high school and was reporting on space and astronomy. And so I've been doing this just as a teenager. It was quite amazing. And then I took a break to go work in software and do other things. And then I came back to it sort of in my mid 20s.
That's excellent. Was there any beyond your childhood what exactly got you back into it in your mid 20s? Was there some specific person or?
Well,
group?
no, I was working I founded a bunch of software companies back in my early 20s, and one company that I was working for was a web design company in Vancouver, and I was sort of providing all this advice to my customers. And I didn't really feel like my advice was very good because I didn't have any real experience in running a website on my own. And so what I decided was I was going to pick one of my hobbies and run a website and just sort of understand what it was like to be public-facing, to be handling emails and see how the traffic worked, and be able to give better advice to my clients. And what happened was I picked one of my hobbies kind of at random. I happened to be reading a Carl Sagan book, Pale Blue Dot, at the time, and I was also reading The Case for Mars by Bob Zubrin. I was reading those two books, and I was like, it's got to be about space. And so I started this website about space, but within a year of maintaining this website, I knew that that's what I wanted to be my job. And so then it was just a matter of figuring out how to scale up the traffic and get more people to visit and find advertisers and be able to eventually quit my job. So that was sort of how I got into it as a career.
Well, that's a fantastic series of events there. And I know all of us who are fans of the projects that you have founded and work with are very glad that it happened. So I guess I had a question about how did you become involved with astronomy and the citizen science community, but I think you've kind of covered that with...
Well, I mean, actually getting involved from the citizen science thing, really I had to thank, Dr. Pamela Gay, who's my co-host with Astronomy Cast. I mean, she is a professor, but is also one of the pioneers of citizen science and astronomy citizen science. And so she has all these amazing projects on the go, and it's really hard not to kind of get caught up in the enthusiasm of what she's working on. And so me and Pamela and Phil and a few others founded Astrosphere a few years ago, and this umbrella organization that handles all of these projects that we're working on, Cosmic Quest and Astronomy Cast and the virtual star parties and all these things that we're doing. And it's really our goal to help take people's enthusiasm for astronomy and then give them additional skills and abilities and tools they can work on, and even training to let them actually participate and get involved in actual science.
That's fantastic. How did that, because actually it was through Dr. Pamela Gay that I actually became aware of Astronomy Cast and all that, I've been reading some of her articles. I think it was her work on the Galileo little telescope to try to show people how to make a simple telescope for themselves on a low-cost scale. And I was fascinated by that, and I started reading some of her articles, and I found out about Astronomy Cast. How did you meet Dr. Pamela Gay and her associates, I guess?
Yeah, so I had sort of had this idea, like I wanted to get into podcasting back in like 2005, 2006, and I came up with this idea for Astronomy Cast, which would be, I wanted to do a show where it was like one topic a week, different ideas, and I pitched the show to Phil Plait, and and hilariously at the same time, Pamela had pitched her show to Phil Plait at the same time, and he said to me, dude, I'm too busy. Pamela, I'm too busy. Pamela, Fraser, you guys should talk. And so I reached out to her, and within, like, the chemistry was there, and within, I think, a week, we had published our first episode. We just, like, immediately nailed on the rapport, and we were able to kind of get that first show out the door, and it's been, we've been following the same format for years and years and years ever since. We just wrapped up episode 342 this week. So it's just been going. I got hundreds more episode ideas in the list. So that's how it happened. What's funny is we hadn't even met for the first couple of years. People think that we're in a studio somewhere, but we haven't even met. We just record separately. We've met now a couple of times, but it took us better part of a couple of years before we even got a chance to meet.
Well, that's one of the wonderful things about the internet and living in this age, where you can work with people of similar interests and similar enthusiasm, even though they're separated by thousands of miles, hundreds. You're not limited by where you live anymore. And so, as these projects that you've been working on have grown, what does that feel like to see all thousands, in many cases hundreds of thousands, millions sometimes, being involved in these projects through the work that you and your associates have done? How does that feel?
Well, whenever I hear people say that nobody's interested in science and nobody's interested in space and people are just interested in Jersey Shore, I can say you're wrong. Lots and lots of people are really interested, really enthusiastic. We got 36 million people coming to Universe Today last year. We get tens of thousands of listeners to Astronomy Cast, and so on and so on. And it's just like what we see is that there's a massive amount of enthusiasm. And the internet has been this wonderful place for everybody to come together and connect and talk to each other. And so I think it's humbling to be sort of at the center of this, and wonderful to have these connections.
And sort of tying into that, as a society isn't as disinterested as the media might portray, what are, for you, in your opinion, the most exciting discoveries or trends that you see in astronomy today?
Well, I would say that we're living in the golden age of astronomy, that we have more larger observatories and more space observatories than ever before. I get a chance to sort of watch the fire hose of discoveries that are coming out through some of the research journals, but also the press releases and other stuff. And so it's mind-bending how much stuff is going on. I mean, in the time that I've been doing this for 15 years now, reporting at Universe Today. The International Space Station has been launched. We're starting to pin down answers about what quasars are, better ideas of what dark matter is, discovery of icy geysers on Enceladus, and just amazing stuff that's going on. So rings around asteroids and new dwarf planets, and it goes on and on and on. So it's almost like there's so much happening so fast. It is literally like a fire hose of new discoveries that are going on, and that's why it's hard to pick what's the best. It's just so much.
It is very overwhelming. Just keeping it, paying attention to the news that's always coming out. Just like Kepler's always finding these exoplanets.
Yeah, another 1,000 planets discovered.
It's like no big deal.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. There's never a boring day in the news of astronomy. And what advice would you have perhaps for current students who would like to make a career in astronomy or astrophysics, or even just the space industry at large?
Well, this is tough, and we've done a couple of podcasts about this, about building a career in astronomy, in the space science. And the cold reality is there's not a lot of jobs, pure astronomy research jobs, for the demand, for the number of students, and so there can be hundreds of candidates for a single position. And Pamela's recommendation is always, hedge your bets, learn other skills. If you are good, if you've got computer knowledge, if you've got, if you're good at databases, if good at engineering, there's both sort of a real need for people who can, work on a project but also have that engineering knowledge, or work on a project but also have that computer knowledge. But also, all of those skills can help you transition into other careers as well. So if you really want to be an astronomer, maybe you can help design the next generation of telescope or work with NASA on robots. And if that doesn't work out, you could still be an engineer, you could still be a computer scientist, and in computer science, there's a zillion jobs. Mm-hmm. So I think that you kind of have to be realistic about it, and don't go pure astronomy if you don't have to. But I mean, if that's your calling and that's what you love to do, go full bore and try to get one of those positions.
All right. Do you see any, as we mentioned, some of the trends, and there's so many discoveries going on nowadays in these fields. Do you think that we'll witness any major breakthroughs, maybe not even just limited to astronomy, but in just the space industry at large?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest breakthrough that we're looking at right now in space travel is the work that Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX. It's his goal to create a fully reusable rocket system, which, when you think about this idea that if you take an airplane and you fly it across the Atlantic and then you detonate it on the landing strip, that's madness, right? $50 million airplane. So, it's the same thing with rockets. You build this $100 million rocket, you shoot it up, and the whole thing's gone. But SpaceX is really around the corner now from starting to reuse. The bottom part, the first stage, will land back at the launch facility, and they'll plop a new second stage on it, and the second stage will fly and land. So we're really close to that, and so I think that is going to unleash a whole new world that in the olden days, you looked at $10,000 a pound or $5,000 a pound to launch something into orbit. We're going to get to this point where it's going to be dramatically less. And so with everything, with the internet, we didn't know what we would use terabyte hard drives for or 100 megabit download speeds, but we figured it out. And so it's the same thing, that when those launch costs come down, when that technological miniaturization comes in, you're going to get new kinds of things being launched into space that we had no idea that we were going to want. And so it's almost like, I always call it this investment in chaos. We don't know what's going to happen, but all the trends say amazing things are going to happen because it's going to get cheaper and it's going to get smaller.
Well, I know I've been a great fan of the work that Elon Musk has been doing in several industries, but especially with SpaceX. If anyone has an interest in that, it's hard not to be fascinated by the work he's doing. A lot of times I'll describe to some of my friends who aren't so familiar. I'm like, well, just imagine this. You know how in all the cartoons they show the rocket go up and then land back down? He's building that.
Yeah, totally.
It's fascinating. All right, I'm going to wrap this up here. This was something that's very speculative, and it's hard to imagine if it'll be right or wrong. But just a guess, do you think that we will find either signs of life or actual life is still active on either maybe Europa or Mars or something like that?
I don't know. I have a tendency to think that we will. I think that wherever we find water here on Earth, we find life in the most extreme environments. And at the same time, there's good evidence that particles are passing between the planets, this idea of panspermia. We have meteorites on Earth that came from Mars. There's stuff on Earth that came from Venus, other planets, asteroids. So you can imagine this situation where a micro meteorite has got tons of bacteria and has made the journey back and forth. In fact, life on Earth might have come from Mars. So it feels to me that it is feasible that there is this kind of transport between the worlds. And bacteria is very hard. It can last for long periods of time. And if enough happens, and these environments, these wet, warm environments on places like Europa and Enceladus and such, could support life. So I feel pretty hopeful that we are going to find life within the solar system. I don't think we're going to find anything very complex. It's going to be simple life, and I think it's probably going to be related to Earth. Somehow we're going to be able to trace this ancestry of how the life's been moving back and forth. I'm a lot less optimistic about finding life outside of the solar system. You know, the Fermi paradox is a pretty troubling idea for me, and I sort of feel that intelligent life, is very, very rare in the universe.
All right. Well, that's thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and we all will continue to enjoy the work that you and your associates do. And thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.